Welcome to Niga Medguide. Today I will explain female reproductive cycle, also known as menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle is the monthly series of hormonal changes and physical events that occurs regularly inside the female body. It prepares the female body for potential pregnancy. Menstrual cycle consists of changes inside the ovaries and uterus under the influence of hormones that are released by hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So main organs that are involved in the menstrual cycle are ovaries, uterus, hypothalamus and pituitary gland. Menstrual cycle is a 28-day cycle that occurs throughout the childbearing period, from the menarche to the menopause. Menarche is the onset of childbearing period during which a female body experiences menstrual bleeding for the first time, also known as first periods. It occurs during the age of 12 and 14. Menopause is the cessation of that childbearing period during which a female body stop experiencing monthly menstrual bleeding. It occurs between the age of 45 and 55. Menstrual cycle consists of two cycles that occurs simultaneously and in synchrony of each other. These cycles are ovarian cycle, which consists of changes inside the ovaries; uterine cycle, which consists of changes inside the uterus. This 28-day cycle starts with the menstruation. So first 1 to 5 days of this cycle is the menstruation phase, during which a female body bleeds vaginally, also known as periods. At 14th day, ovulation occurs, during which egg is released from the ovaries. So, period before the ovulation is known as pre-ovulatory phase, and period after the ovulation is known as post-ovulatory phase. When we talk about the stages or phases of menstrual cycle, then it is important to mention that ovarian cycle has its own three phases and uterine cycle has its own three phases. So first we see the phases of ovarian cycle. First 1 to 13 days period is the follicular phase, 14th day is the ovulation phase, and 15 to 28 days period is the luteal phase. Now we see the phases of uterine cycle. First 1 to 5 days period is the menstruation phase, 6 to 14 days period is the proliferative phase, and 15 to 28 days period is the secretory phase. So follicular phase of ovarian cycle correspond to the menstrual and proliferative phase of uterine cycle. Ovulation phase of ovarian cycle corresponds to the late proliferative phase of uterine cycle. Luteal phase of ovarian cycle correspond to the secretory phase of uterine cycle. These two cycles run side by side and work in coordination of each other, as changes in the ovaries during the ovarian cycle directly influence the changes in the uterus during uterine cycle. Now we will discuss in detail the synchronicity of the phases of ovarian and uterine cycle. Menstrual cycle begins with the menstruation that usually occurs from the day 1 to day 5. In previous menstrual cycle, if fertilization does not occur, then due to decreased level of estrogen and progesterone, uterine innermost lining, that is endometrium, cannot sustain and starts shedding. The shedding of the functional layer of the endometrium produce menstrual bleeding, that is known as menstruation. So, decreased level of estrogen and progesterone during the ovarian cycle directly influence the menstruation phase of uterine cycle. After the menstruation begins, follicular phase of the ovarian cycle starts at the same time and it usually occurs from day 1 to day 13. During the follicular phase, hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone which stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone, that is also known as FSH, stimulates the production and maturation of ovarian follicles. Only one follicle become dominant and mature, and this mature follicle is known as Graafian follicle. Mature follicle start producing estrogen hormone that directly stimulates the proliferation of functional layer of endometrium. So estrogen that is produced by mature follicle stimulates the proliferative phase of the uterine cycle. Under the influence of the estrogen hormone during the proliferative phase, innermost lining of the endometrium that has been shed during the menstrual cycle starts regenerating. Endometrium becomes thickens and rich in blood supply, and uterine mucus secreting glands begins to grow. So during follicular phase, mature follicle secretes estrogen hormone, and this estrogen hormone stimulates the proliferative phase of uterine cycle. This shows the exact relationship between the follicular phase of the ovarian cycle and proliferative phase of uterine cycle. Around day 14, ovulation occurs. As mature follicle secretes large amount of estrogen, it creates positive feedback on the pituitary gland. As a result, pituitary gland secretes a large amount of luteinizing hormone. Under the influence of luteinizing hormone, mature follicle ruptures and release ovum, the process known as ovulation. During ovulation, following changes inside the female body are observed, such as female body temperature rises by 1 degree Celsius, cervical mucus that is dry and thick in normal conditions becomes thin and watery, which is helpful for sperm movements. At the same time, endometrium becomes thicker and edematous and blood supply increases, which prepare the uterus for possible implantation. After ovulation, luteal phase of ovarian cycle begins, which usually occur from the day 15 to day 28. Mature follicle after releasing egg converts into the corpus luteum. Corpus luteum secretes large amount of progesterone and some amount of estrogen and inhibin. Combination of progesterone, estrogen, and inhibin from the corpus luteum suppress the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, so levels of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone falls. It prevents the development of follicles during the second half of cycle. Progesterone that is released from the corpus luteum during the luteal phase stimulates the secretory phase of uterine cycle. So, under the influence of progesterone, uterine lining becomes more edematous and thicker, blood supply increases, uterine glands becomes more coiler and secretory, nutrient rich secretions develop that ultimately prepare the uterus for implantation of fertilized ovum. If fertilization does not occur, then this corpus luteum start degenerating after 14 days. Resultantly, progesterone and estrogen that are being released from the corpus luteum also falls, and endometrium innermost lining of the uterus that is dependent on these progesterone and estrogen hormone start shedding. So menstruation begins again. If fertilization occurs, then fertilized ovum travels from the fallopian tube to the uterus where it is embedded, and it starts secreting human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, also known as HCG hormone. This HCG hormone sustains the corpus luteum, so enabling it to continue secreting progesterone and estrogen. In this case, endometrium inner lining does not shed, so menstruation does not happen. It happens for just few months of pregnancy. After that, placenta takes over this role. Conclusively, menstrual cycle is the coordinated interaction between the ovarian and uterine cycle. Ovaries produce hormones such as estrogen and progesterone that directly influence the cyclic events of uterine cycle. Follicular phase of the ovarian cycle corresponds to the menstrual and proliferative phase of uterine cycle. Ovulation occurs at the mid of the cycle. Luteal phase of the ovarian cycle corresponds to the secretory phase of uterine cycle. So, ovarian and uterine cycle occurs in synchrony of each other, and together they make the reproductive cycle. I hope I made this topic easy and understandable for you. If you found this video helpful, then kindly subscribe, like and share my channel. Thank you for watching.